You open the medicine cabinet in your bathroom, it is late, the house is quiet, and the only light is the harsh bulb above the mirror. You look at the small orange plastic bottle sitting on the shelf next to the shaving cream. You know exactly what is inside. It is the chemical override. It is the pill you asked your doctor for when you finally swallowed your pride and admitted that the engine was no longer starting on its own. You take the pill, you wait the required amount of time, and you force the system to perform. And maybe it works. Maybe for an hour you feel like the guy you were 20 years ago. But I want you to think about how you feel the next morning. You wake up, you look at the ceiling, and the silence is still there. The morning response, that automatic daily diagnostic test that your body used to run every single day without you ever having to ask, is completely gone. You realize that you did not actually fix anything. You just rented your own biology for an hour. You bypassed a failing system to get a temporary result, and now the rental period is over, and you're back to carrying the exact same quiet, heavy reality. I know that feeling because I lived it. I spent the last years of my 50s living out of a suitcase as a corporate sales executive, flying from Austin to Chicago, closing contracts, managing a team, and pretending that I was invincible. I was a guy who believed that leverage and willpower could solve any problem in the world. If a quarter was down, I pushed harder. If I was exhausted, I drank more coffee. When my body stopped responding the way it was supposed to, I treated it like a bad quarter. I looked for the fastest, most efficient patch available. I got the prescription. I thought I was being practical. I thought I had found the workaround. I was completely wrong. I was not solving a problem. I was masking a system failure. In my first marriage, that reliance on a chemical patch created a massive silent distance between us. I was terrified of unpredictability. When you rely on a pill, intimacy ceases to be a natural shared experience. It becomes a scheduled event that requires a countdown clock. You're always wondering if the patch is going to hold. You start avoiding your partner because you do not want to deal with the logistics, or worse, the possibility that the override switch might fail. I did not talk to her about it. I just pulled away. I blame my travel schedule. I blame the stress of the new fiscal year. I invented exhaustion. I was too proud to sit down and say that my infrastructure was failing, so I just let the house burn down quietly from the inside. A lot of men my age are walking around carrying this exact same secret. We think we're broken. We think we have lost our manhood. We treat the loss of our physical response as a sexual problem, a failure of desire, or just the inevitable, depressing reality of crossing the 50-year mark. What I had to learn and what fundamentally changed not just my health but my entire understanding of my own body is that the loss of that morning response is not a localized sexual issue. It is a cardiovascular warning siren. It is the oil pressure light on the dashboard of your life flashing red. When I finally got tired of renting my own body, I started to look into the mechanics of how the machine actually works. I am a guy who understands supply chains, pipelines, and logistics. I needed to see my biology through that same lens. I learned that an erection is a purely hydraulic process. It requires clear pipes, strong pressure, and a highly responsive signaling system. But the pipes inside your body are lined with a living, breathing layer of tissue called the endothelium. Before my late 50s, I did not know what the endothelium was. I did not know that I had thousands of miles of this single-cell lining running through my body. And I did not know that this lining is responsible for producing a chemical messenger called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the signal. It is the green light. When your brain wants to flush the system, it relies on the endothelium to release this gas, which tells the blood vessels to relax, open wide, and let the heavy volume of blood rush in. When you are 25, that factory is brand new. The signal fires, the pipes open, the pressure builds, and the system works effortlessly. But I had spent 30 years destroying my factory. I lived on adrenaline and cortisol, which are powerful vasoconstrictors. They literally tell your blood vessels to clamp down and tighten because your body thinks you are in a permanent state of emergency. I slept poorly. I ate heavy processed food in airport lounges. I was pouring concrete into my own plumbing. When you take a pill, you are artificially forcing blood through rigid, stressed, narrowed pipes. You are not healing the tissue. You are not restoring the factory. You are just redlining a damaged engine. I realized that if I wanted to own my body again, if I wanted to wake up in the morning and feel that quiet pulse of life returning naturally, I had to stop looking for a patch. I had to rebuild the foundation. For me, rebuilding that foundation meant establishing 5 specific load-bearing walls. I call them pillars because if you remove any one of them, the roof eventually caves in. I had to change how I managed these 5 areas of my life every single day, without exception. The first pillar was the one I had ignored for my entire professional career. I had to completely dismantle my relationship with sleep. For decades, I treated sleep as a necessary annoyance. It was just the dark space between closing one deal and opening the next. I thought operating on 5 hours of sleep made me tough. I did not understand that sleep is the only time the maintenance crew is allowed into the building. The endothelial lining, those delicate cells that produce the nitric oxide you desperately need, only repair themselves when you are in deep restorative sleep. That is when your blood pressure drops, your stress hormones clear out, and the body actually heals the damage you did to it during the day. If you cut your sleep short, you are firing the maintenance crew before they even unroll their tools. I live in Scottsdale now. The desert gets incredibly hot during the day, but it cools off at night. I started using that natural drop in temperature. I made my bedroom freezing. I stopped bringing my phone or my laptop into the bed. But the biggest shift in this first pillar was addressing how I actually brought oxygen into my body at night. I realized I was sleeping with my mouth open. I would wake up with a dry mouth, feeling exhausted. I read that nitric oxide is actually produced in massive quantities in your nasal cavity. When you breathe through your nose, you pull that gas down into your lungs, and it enters your bloodstream, keeping your blood vessels relaxed all night. When you breathe through your mouth, you bypass that completely. I started putting a small piece of medical tape over my lips at night to force my jaw closed. It felt absolutely ridiculous the first few times I did it. I felt claustrophobic, but I pushed through it. By the second week, the change was profound. I was waking up feeling a depth of physical rest I had not known since my 30s. I was finally giving the factory the environment it needed to run the overnight diagnostic test. The second pillar was about how I primed the engine the moment I opened my eyes. My old routine was to wake up, groan, stumble into the kitchen, and pour a massive mug of dark roast coffee down my throat while my eyes were barely open. I was taking a body that had been dehydrating for 8 hours, a body with thick, slow-moving blood, and I was dumping a powerful chemical vasoconstrictor straight into the system. I was literally telling my pipes to clamp down the second I woke up. I changed the entire sequence. Now I wake up early before the sun is up. The first thing I do is walk to the kitchen and drink a large glass of room temperature water with a pinch of high-quality sea salt in it. The salt provides the trace minerals to help the cells absorb the water. I flush the pipes. I give the system volume and fluidity before I ever introduce a stimulant. I wait an hour before I touch caffeine. You have to respect the mechanics of your own plumbing. You cannot push heavy, sludgy blood through damaged pipes and expect the system to be responsive. You have to provide the water to keep the river moving. The third pillar was how I move the machine. When guys my age decide they need to get back in shape, they usually do something stupid. They join a gym and try to lift heavy weights the same way they did when they were playing college football. Or they try to run 5 miles on pavement. When your system is already compromised, when your blood vessels are rigid, putting your body through extreme, punishing physical stress just causes another massive spike in cortisol. Your body feels attacked and the pipes clamp down even harder. I shifted my entire philosophy from punishment to circulation. I did not need to break my muscles down. I needed to create a steady, consistent demand for oxygen. I started taking long, brisk walks through the trails near my house in Arizona. Every single day. I do some light resistance work a few times a week just to keep the frame strong, but the core of my movement is about sustained friction. There is a very specific mechanical reason for this. When you walk briskly, your heart pumps a steady, elevated volume of blood through your arteries. As that blood rushes through, it creates physical friction against the walls of the blood vessels. It rubs against the endothelium. That physical friction is the exact mechanical trigger that tells those cells to wake up and manufacture more nitric oxide. I was not walking to lose weight or look good in a suit. I was walking to manually clear the rust out of my supply lines. The fourth pillar was the raw material I was putting into the factory, the fuel. You cannot expect a high-performance engine to run on cheap, dirty fuel. I had to stop eating heavy, processed meals at 8 o'clock at night. If your digestive system is working overtime to break down a massive steak and a couple of beers while you're trying to sleep, Your body does not have the bandwidth to repair the vascular system. It is a zero-sum game of resources. I started eating my last meal earlier in the evening. I wanted the engine cooled down before I parked it for the night. And I started seeking out the specific foods that provide the dietary nitrates your body uses to build nitric oxide. Beets, spinach, arugula, dark leafy greens, citrus. I stopped looking at food as a reward for a stressful day and started looking at it as the exact inventory my body needed to rebuild the pipes. The fifth pillar was the one I avoided the longest. It was the psychological environment. You can tape your mouth, you can drink the salt water, you can walk 5 miles a day, and you can eat spinach until you are sick of it. But if your mind is living in a constant state of performance anxiety, your body will never relax. The brain controls the entire hydraulic system. If the brain senses fear, shame, or pressure, it floods the system with adrenaline and the gates close. I am married to Alyssa now. She is 9 years younger than me, and she is a woman who simply does not tolerate unspoken tension. When we first got together, I was still in the middle of rebuilding this infrastructure. I was terrified of having an unpredictable night. But because I had learned how the machine worked, because I understood the cardiovascular mechanics of it, I did not hide. I remember sitting out on the patio with her one evening. The sun was going down, the air was warm, and I just laid it all out on the table. I explained the vascular connection. I told her that I was repairing a lifetime of bad habits and that sometimes the system was going to be slow to respond. I told her it had nothing to do with my attraction to her and everything to do with clearing out the rust in the pipes. The moment I said it out loud, the pressure evaporated. She looked at me, she understood the mechanics, and she became my partner in the process. We removed the pass or fail test from the bedroom. If we are exhausted, we go to sleep. If things are slow, we do not panic. That honesty lowered my baseline stress in a way that no supplement ever could. By removing the fear of failure, I actually allowed my body the psychological safety it needed to start functioning again. I want to be brutally honest with you about the timeline. When you start implementing these pillars, nothing happens on the first day. Nothing happens on the 10th day. You're trying to reverse decades of structural damage. For the first few months, I was doing all the right things, and I was still waking up to silence. It is an incredibly frustrating place to be. It is the exact moment where the little orange bottle in the medicine cabinet starts calling your name again. It is the moment where most men quit and accept defeat. But I kept telling myself to trust the maintenance schedule. I kept walking. I kept hydrating. I kept protecting my sleep. It was about 4 or 5 months into the process. I woke up early one morning, lying on my back, listening to the quiet of the house, and I felt a pulse. It was faint. It was not the roaring engine of a 20-year-old, but it was a response. It was a clear, undeniable signal that the factory was coming back online. The body was running its diagnostic test, and the signal was finally getting through the pipes. I laid there in the dark, and I felt a wave of relief that was so heavy it almost brought me to tears. Because I knew in that exact moment that I was not permanently broken. I knew that I was not going to spend the rest of my life renting my own biology. I had built the foundation, and the house was holding up. Over the next year, that consistency returned. The mornings became predictable again. And the psychological shift that happens when your body starts to trust you again is massive. You stop walking through the world like a man holding a secret. You look people in the eye. The confidence returns because it is rooted in physical reality, not a chemical trick. I look at my son Ethan now. He is 31, working in commercial real estate, grinding his gears, living on his phone, drinking too much coffee, and sleeping too little. He thinks his engine will just take the abuse forever. I do not give him lectures. But when we are standing in the kitchen, I drop hints. I talk to him about the supply chain. I tell him that every skipped hour of sleep, every stress response is a withdrawal from an account that he will eventually have to pay back with interest. I want him to protect his foundation now, so he does not have to spend his 50s trying to rebuild the walls. And I look at the guys my age. I see them at the golf course or standing in line at the airport. I see the quiet resignation in their faces. I know what they are dealing with. I know they think the best parts of their physical lives are strictly in the rearview mirror. It is not true. If you are an older man waking up to that silence, you have a choice. You can keep looking for a patch. You can keep treating the symptom and living in fear of the day the pill stops working. Or you can take over the maintenance of your own life. You can start protecting your sleep like it is your most valuable asset. You can hydrate the engine before you hit it with caffeine. You can start walking every single day to clear the lines. You can change the fuel, and you can find the courage to be honest with your partner and remove the psychological pressure that is choking your system. It is going to take time. You are going to have to be incredibly patient with a body that you have been impatient with for a very long time. But the machine wants to run. The body wants to heal. If you stop applying temporary patches and start building those pillars, the system can come back online. You are not broken. Start tomorrow morning. Start with the water, start with the walk, and make the decision to own your infrastructure again. Simple as that.